Coincidence? I think not!
What's going on, guys? So before you call this video premature, know that I had no intention of going so far down the rabbit hole. When I started making the script for this video, I had very little idea of where I wanted to go. But each time I found something interesting to talk about, it kept expanding into other areas, and now basically it's a whole DLC speculation for the unreleased Ogre Kingdoms in Warhammer 3, due out early next February. The Ogre Kingdoms have been one of my most looked forward to elements of Warhammer 3. The idea of an almost entirely monstrous roster, along with even more massive creatures, just got my blood pumping. So with the recent avalanche of gameplay footage heavily featuring the ogres, and today's release of the Enter the World of the Ogre Kingdoms trailer, it was surprising to see two very important units missing from their roster. Creative Assembly has not yet revealed the details of the ogre roster in blog format like we have for other races like Tzeentch. But we do know from their in-game buildings and various storefront pages that their roster will include at least 23 units. This is around the same number of units that both Tomb Kings and the Vampire Coast are released with, coming in at 23 and 26 units respectively. But also one of my biggest disappointments among the many recent awesome announcements is the confirmation that the Thundertusk will not appear at launch for the Ogre Kingdoms. This Discord message from the community manager lets us know that at least for now, no Thundertusks. While it is normal for most base launch rosters to be missing some units and characters, I find it very strange that the Thundertusk won't be included for the ogres. On tabletop, it was an army centerpiece unit. When it came to building its model, the Thundertusk and Stonehorn shared pieces in their box kit, where you had to choose to build one or the other. They share the same basic overall body, but then each version has pieces that make it either a Thundertusk or a Stonehorn. This allows Games Workshop to make more units for the tabletop game, while also reducing the need for a brand new casting mold for a new sculpt. The same process exists for the development of many units in the Total War Warhammer series. Wireframes and animation rigs are created that are the underlying skeletal structure for any unit, and then textures are applied over those bases. When multiple units share the same basic physiology, it makes sense for them to use the same so-called bones of the rig, and then apply a unique texture over it, and maybe some unique animations to set that unit apart. It saves them in production costs, and it allows the development of new content that we get to enjoy that doesn't have to start from zero for them. The last DLC for Warhammer 2, The Silence and the Fury, saw in a single content drop the addition of many large, eagerly anticipated monsters that many thought would have to come over multiple DLCs, or maybe not even at all. The Beastman Gorgon, for example, which many have theorized that it was probably included because its animation rig will also be used for the Keeper of Secrets. The Greater Demon of Selesh, sure to come in Warhammer 3. This is one of the positive examples where we see that shared assets can create more overall content. Sometimes though, we get existing texture assets from 5 years ago being applied to a new unit and a brand new game that should have got its own unique look, like the Chaos and Doom Knights of Tzeentch. Which kind of makes no sense since the Khorne Warriors got unique assets. Applying all of this to the Ogre Kingdoms, the Thundertusk will most likely reuse the skeletal rig and most parts of the Stonehorn wireframe. So it's sad to see that such an iconic unit of the Ogres is most likely being saved for a future Ogre DLC down the road. But maybe we get it as an FLC similar to how the Tomb King Bone Giant was introduced, but I wouldn't hold my breath. The Yhetees, the other unit conspicuously missing, has a shared theme with the Thundertusk. Both originate from the cold peaks of the extremely tall mountains of Morn, based on the real-life Himalayan mountain range. And they both have an aura of frost around themselves, along with using frost-based attacks. The only other significant units associated with Snowy Peaks are Sabertusks and the Hunter Hero Choice, who are both already confirmed for the starting Ogre roster. Now I know some people will complain that we aren't getting every single Ogre unit with the base game, but for myself, I'm happy to pay more for future content after launch if it feels like it's good quality and it's worth the money. The Tomb Kings DLC was and still is really excellent, and if Creative Assembly decides to make a DLC Lord Pack for them, with the last remaining units like the Chimeric Titan or the Great Weapon Ushabti, I would happily pay for that. It makes an already good experience better. But that's just my personal opinion, and you're free to spend your money however you would like. With that said, let's now move on to the main point of the video. If the Thundertusks and Yhetees are being saved to come in a future Ogre DLC, what lords and other units will they come with? So of the remaining Ogre Kingdom's characters, we have 3 existing choices who had rules in the tabletop game. Golgfag Maneater, the most well-known Ogre mercenary, has all of his associated units and their variants in the base game roster already. His inclusion is pretty much inevitable since he's the oldest Ogre Kingdom character from Warhammer Fantasy, but in my opinion he's going to come as an FLC lord instead. Brag the Gutsman is a feared duelist even among the ogres because he kind of just uses a weapon that ignores their gut plates and disembowels them, and that's the worst thing that can happen to an ogre. But because of this, he's an outcast in their society and no ogres are willing to follow him. He wanders from tribe to tribe, making much more sense as a legendary hero. And finally, Gark Ironskin. He's probably my favorite character of the 3. He has never appeared in any army book, but was released in the White Dwarf magazine during 6th edition. His tribe is known for Rhinox cavalry and an abundance of lead belchers and iron blasters. He has really strong relations with the Chaos Dwarves, who he trades slaves with, and they also gave him his demonic metal Rhinox mount. I see him having the possibility to be either DLC or an FLC, depending on what CA decides to do. If Creative Assembly decides to only go with one of the 3 characters that had rules, my bet will be on Gark Ironskin. But I would like to suggest a 4th choice, Jhared the Red. So Jhared the Red is the only named Ogre Hunter character in lore. The first ever Ogre Hunter, he was cast out to die from his tribe as a child because he was covered in red hair at birth. He survived his initial death sentence and oddly was accepted into a pack of Sabertusks and grew up amongst them. He tamed the creatures of the mountains and then returned home to his former tribe and took his vengeance. He really is just a side note character, but we have seen characters who never had a model or unique rules be implemented in Total War Warhammer before. Nakai the Wanderer was just a character that appeared in lore snippets of various Lizardmen army books and never had a widely released rule set or a unique model. Jhared the Red may not be included because he is implied to be a more historic character rather than a current one. There's not a timeline given to when he existed, but I can see Creative Assembly and Games Workshop adjusting the timeline and lore to bring an interesting character like him into the present, just like they did with Repants for Bretonia. So because the Ogre Kingdom's never had many named characters to start with, I think we have a chance of seeing a new hunter character being introduced. Look like. Wrapping all of this previously discussed information together, I think we can speculate on what an Ogre Kingdoms DLC could possibly look like. The Ogre Kingdoms have had a pretty compact roster since they, like the Tomb Kings, were one of the last races to be made playable in Warhammer Fantasy, so I think there's a possibility we see brand new Ogre units being created to fill out a DLC. Besides the Thundertusk and Yhetees, no other units are missing, but when it comes to heroes, we are missing the Bruisers, who are a generic melee hero option. So with a generic hero option and 2 missing units, we are about halfway to a Lord Pack's normal quantity of content. For a generic Lord type, I can see getting a Lord level Hunter option. Traditionally, Hunters could not lead armies on tabletop, but these restrictions have generally been ignored in favor of the rule of cool for Total War, which I agree with. They would have all the normal mount options available to regular Hunters, like Rhinox and Mournfang, and the Stonehorn, of course, but would also get a Thundertusk mount, which I think would be unique since they have a little bit more abilities than the Stonehorns usually have. When it comes to possible new units, though, we will have to look through more obscure lore or trust that Games Workshop and Creative Assembly will fill the gaps. Looking at possible Hunter-themed units, we have the Dreadmaw and Blood Vultures. The Dreadmaw are gigantic worms that appeared in the Monstrous Arcanum Forge World supplement. They tunnel through earth and stone with ease and ambush unsuspecting prey. While these creatures are probably more well known in the eastern steppes, they also live within the Mountains of Morn and have been known to attack caravans traveling on the Ivory Road. They have options for breath attack and poisonous attacks, and would be a single monstrous entity. Originally, I thought that if we ever got the Dreadmaw, it would be with a possible Hobgoblin campaign pack, but I have included it here because after the campaign map reveal, we saw the extremely reduced size of the eastern steppes, so now I think it's pretty unlikely to get the Hobgoblins as a separate race. This would most likely cost the most for CA to animate and texture, so it's less likely in my opinion. Blood Vultures. Blood Vultures are large predatory birds that live high in the Mountains of Morn. They were originally just an upgrade option for Hunters in 8th edition, which acted as a missile weapon, but here they would be expanded to a full unit that would function very similarly to the Tomb King's Carrion or Fellbats of the vampire counts. Ogres have no flying units because they fat. but having a weak flying unit to me would feel like a really good utility that they could use to harass backlines, but it doesn't go outside of their monster-based playstyle. If they decide to go for more obscure creatures or units, then the Firemouth is a great area of possible exploration for new units. The Firemouth is the other Ogre God, a giant volcano at the center of the Mountains of Morn. Very little has been explained about this area outside of lore concerning the Firebellies, but we do know that when their initiates do the rituals required to wield the fire magic of the volcano, one ritual is that they have to consume a cart horse-sized fire beetle that burrows through the lava. To me, that sounds like a very fitting creature to become part of the Ogre Kingdoms. I can see them being a unit of monstrous creatures, similar numbers to maybe Saber-tusks or a little bit smaller. They would have fire attacks and apply fire damage, and they explode when killed. They would be slow and tanky, but have very high armor and fire resist to make up for that speed. What I think makes this even more likely if it ever got implemented is that the Lava Beetle model would also be a great base for the Chimeric Titan of the Tomb Kings if we get a DLC for them in Warhammer 3. From my quick looks through the Ogre Army books, these were the most interesting possibilities that I came across. If you happen to know of some obscure lore or some other creature that would sound really interesting in their roster, let me know. Outside of never-before-seen units, unit champions have also been turned into brand new units for Total War Warhammer before, such as in the case of Chameleon Stalkers for the Lizardmen, but I didn't see many examples that seemed applicable to the Ogres since their roster already includes a lot of variants in its core units. We've also seen new unit variations being created that never existed before, like Sacred Coxagors. Yhetees seem like good candidates for this, as in lore they attack with either their claws or clubs they enchant with frost, making them an easy weapon choice variant to include. The regular claw version would most likely be anti-infantry, and the club version akin to great weapons, giving them higher weapon strength and a larger increase in armor piercing. So for this proposed DLC we have Jhared the Red, or a new hunter character in the Legendary Lord slot, Bruisers as a generic melee hero, Thundertusks as the centerpiece unit of the DLC, Yhetees and maybe a club variant of them included, Blood Vultures as a flying harass tool, since they would use mostly existing assets, and Fire Beetles as tanky frontline options who blow up when they die. So what do you think? Am I way off assuming that the Thundertusk will be a part of future Ogre DLC? Do you think we will get a new Ogre Hunter character? Or will we get Gark Ironskin as a Lord choice and Golgfag as the FLC Lord? If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below and I'd love to hear your theories also. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for any missing content. I really appreciate it as it helps the video get shown to other people, and currently I am trying to hit 1,000 subscribers on the channel so I can apply to be a verified content creator partner with Creative Assembly. Achieving this would allow me early access to new information, allowing me to produce better and faster content for all of you. My name is Fohammer and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.